So you're welcome to open up that R Markdown file. You just open it with the R program or R Studio, and you can follow through when we get to that point. But rather than that, I will start sharing my screen. All right, can everybody see this?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so here is our agenda for today. So I'm going to introduce what is R Markdown. Then we'll kind of go over what is the end goal, like why do we want to use R Markdown, followed by what is in an R Markdown, so the structures. Then that's when I will start go over the quick references. So it includes things like how to edit some texts, how to do some code chunks, and what I consider the write-up section. Then I will do a live demonstration of how to actually code in R Markdown. That's something I've decided to do because I've seen that its students tend to pay attention better when the professor or the tutor actually live code with the student. So it makes it easier and more hands-on that way. And then the last thing, we'll just go over some questions that people have. But feel free. This is not a lecture, so if you have any questions, just ask, and we can stop. But if you have any general questions, you can always leave it to the end. So to give a brief introduction to what R Markdown, essentially Markdown and R kind of work together to produce reports, dashboards, documents, presentation that are a lot more streamlined and a lot more together. And you can embed a lot of that about a lot of the art stuff within Markdown. And that was introduced as an alternative way, so then people start doing a lot of screenshots essentially. Oh, and for people who are familiar with Markdown, this is sort of the workflow as the image on the right to kind of go over how Markdown and R are going to work together. So I'm sure everyone's familiar when you took a screenshot of your visualization, but when you try to put it onto Word or put it onto a Google Doc, it gets compressed. It doesn't look as well. It kind of looks like the image on the left. You can sort of interpret from it, but it's not great, versus the one on the right is a lot more clearer. You can tell it's from the source. And that's sort of what R Markdown is. The strength of R Markdown is keeping the original visualization as closely as possible. So other than just being able to do that, another great strength, it's free. So it's just a formatting tool that R has. There's no packages or anything related to creating an R Markdown. It's highly customizable. So in terms of texts, the visualization, creating even dashboards, even doing shinies, which are interactive visualizations within R. These are all capable of combining all of that together. And once again, like no more screenshots, you embed visualization within the report. And one thing I find really helpful is there are multiple output formats. It's no longer just a R file and you try to put everything in one Google Doc or one Word document. There's Word, there's PDF, there's HTML, there's tons and tons and tons of different outputs you can. I'm just going to mainly focus on Word, PDF, and HTML because those are the most easiest to learn and those are the most widely used out there. All right, so before we even tackle trying to code, we need to understand that there are structures within R Markdown. So it starts with, on the top, a metadata, which kind of defines how you want the output to look like, what kind of output you want within the R Markdown, and how do you want your visualization? Do you want the figure size to be specified? Do you want a table size specified? That is all within the metadata. Then there are the R code chunks. So that's where you actually do your R coding, where you can start to embed visualizations, where you do your calculations and your analyses. Then the third component is what I like to call the write-up. So that's where you have your texts, you can embed local files, you can embed short R code, and that's where you typically write about like your interpretation of the analysis, or where do you like your conclusions, your abstract, your introduction, that sort of thing. So I'm going to jump on to actually going over R. So I'm going to stop this and jump over to R. So when you open R, this is typically what you see. So to create an R Markdown file, you literally go to File, New File, and click R Markdown. Then a pop-up shows up. You give it a title. So here I'm just going to write workshop. So there are many different default output formats, like I've mentioned. There's presentation, shinies, or different templates from different packages you could get. You can even create an empty document from the bottom left from the pop-up. And you don't even have to worry about, if I pick HTML, can I still get a Word document? You can still do that. This is just what do you want it to be the default initialized format. So I'm just going to click OK. Any second. Here we go. So this is the default, which kind of gives you a little more instructions on how our Markdown file looks like. So just to go over back to the structures, in the top here is the metadata section. So it starts with 3 dashes and ends with 3 dashes, and includes a title, an author, a date, and an output. These 4 are required. There are ways to make sure that they don't show up in your R Markdown file, but those are required within your R Markdown in order for you to run it. So if you see between line 8 to 10, line 18 to 20, and line 26 to 28, these are what we considered the R code chunks. So the structures are 3 backticks. That's on the same keyboard as the tilde, or like the squiggly right next to your number 1, followed by a squiggly line, then R, then a space, then what do you want to call that code chunk, then a comma space, followed by any parameters you want to put in. So here, this include equals false. And we will go over some of the most common parameters for our code chunk. The purpose of what I'm showing here is just to kind of show you an idea of what it looks like initialized. Then following through here, between line 11 to line 17, line 21 to line 25, and line 29 and so forth, this is the write-up section. So where you can start to write about what you've seen, or write anything you want, basically, introduction, abstract, results, that sort of stuff, or even if you want to reference certain other things. So that is the structure of an R Markdown. So now I'm going to jump over to the quick reference that I've also uploaded. And what I'm going to do, actually, even before that, my next thing is I'm going to show you how can you get an output from this. So you have, let's say you're done with your R Markdown file, and now you're ready to create that output. So that's the button up here called knit. And that's the terminology that R Markdown chooses. So you knit to, so the default 3 are knit to HTML, which I will click, and it should run pretty quickly. Oh, let me save first. So the knitting is happening down in the console section, and it's going to show you the percentage of how far it has knitted, followed by it's going to show you, so this is the HTML output. It's a little slow. So this is the default R Markdown file and what it comes out as in form of HTML. Whenever you do the knit function, it automatically saves for you and overrides any additional file you have saved the location of the R Markdown file. So this is the HTML version. I will close this and show you the PDF version. If it'll let me. So I don't know if you noticed, but as soon as I click PDF, this PDF underscore document colon default showed up. So R Markdown is recognizing you want more than just an HTML file. So whenever you click knit to something else, it will keep that parameter. So it's knitting. So this is the PDF version. So you can save this, you can print this. And then the last one I want to show is the Word. And while it's knitting, I strongly recommend that you either pick between HTML and Word. So if you have, for example, an interactive visualization, that is when the HTML comes in handy. So you can publish it and it will keep the code and keep the data for you to publish, and you can make interactive widgets or interactive dashboards to show what you want. But if you want to just print, for example, a homework or a project, then I recommend Word, because you can always save from Word to a PDF. And unless you're really good at editing within Adobe PDF versions, it is not that useful for when I try to do it, because R Markdown is much more compatible when knitting to Word than knitting to PDF. There is an additional package that it goes through, so it makes it a little harder for you to format. And sometimes compatibility issue also comes up. So this is what the Word version looks like. Once again, it's relatively the same thing, and all of this can be formatted to the way you like. All right. So now I will jump to the quick guide. And what I'm going to do is I am going to split my screen, and I'm going to knit this into the HTML version. And we will go over on the left-hand side what the code looks like, and on the right-hand side what the output looks like. Should be done soon. Did anybody have any questions to this point? All right. So something that, while it's knitting, something I like to use for R Markdown, like some people mentioned, for projects. And this is really a great tool for example, when you're working for a company and you want to be able to have documents better represented, because it does show how well you're able to analyze and be part of that like complete aesthetics packaging to your work. And it makes it a big deal versus someone who screenshots a lot, and some of the codes are much bigger than some of the other visualizations. And R Markdown kind of gives that good way to structure it all nicely together. All right, so now that it's done knitted, we'll go over some of the basics. So for example, the title and the author stays at top. And this is what I like to call the table of contents section. It's in bullet point form simply because I've chosen to section mine using 2 hashtags, or the number sign versus 1, and we can go over that too. So the first thing to note is to name sections of a markdown, you use the number sign or the hashtag. To do an additional subheadings, you use additional number signs. So a title could be one number sign, a subheading could be two number sign, and the subheading could be 3 number sign, etc. And you can go as many as you like. Then, so the first part I want to go over is some of the text editing techniques. So here, to italicize, you simply surround the word you want with a asterisk. So on the right here, italicize is italicized. Then bold is 2 asterisks. And you can see here, bold is bolded. Then you can always bold and italicize at the same time. So you just combine the 2, which means using 3 asterisks around the text. Very straightforward. Then a list is created using dashes. So like I've written here, dash item 1, dash item 2, dash item 3. The key thing to note here is you need a blank line before your list, or else it's going to think it's a continuous list on one line. Then the next thing I want to showcase is how to embed an equation, and that's using a $ at beginning and the end. So here, F equals MA, F equals MA for the physics equation. I've surrounded it with the $ on each. Then for if you want to embed an entire block, for example, if you want to showcase your linear regression line or your logistic regression line, and you want to really put emphasis on that equation, you would put $2 surrounding it, like I've done here. So for texts that are more longer than a line, for example, you're trying to write 2 paragraphs, but you somehow seem to you want them to separate. What you need to do is put a line and a space at the end of your first paragraph. Sorry, a space followed by a brand new line, or 2 empty spaces if you want to create a brand new paragraph. The next thing I want to showcase is how to do hyperlink. So that's surrounding it with a less than symbol, then a greater than symbol. So here, if I click on this, even in Word, in PDF, or in HTML, it will hyperlink to that website. Then the next part is the citations. And that is using a square brackets with the to the power sign and followed by a number if you want to keep track of your citations. So what I've done here is I've created a citation for R Markdown. We'll always keep our references at the end of your document. And here's this 1. If I click on the 1, it will go to the very bottom of my page and show, and you can see that's where my reference is. And that's one of the things that R Markdown does well is no matter where you put your reference in your document, it will always go to the bottom of the list. Unless you specify you don't want to, it will always keep it at the bottom of the list. So even though I have cited it up here and I've listed down right after it, R Markdown knows to keep it at the bottom. And it's a great way for you to keep track. Okay, how many references have I used? Because it's not going to keep it where you want it. In many cases, that's not R Markdown. Now, the last thing is to create a block of text. So maybe you have a conclusion or you want to emphasize something really important. This is where it kind of gets closer to our coding slightly. So this is where we considered a code chunk, but here we're not coding anything. We're just simply putting a block of text. So that's using the 3 backticks, which is also the same as the tilde button. So the next thing I want to go over are the code chunks. So in coding in R Markdown, everything begins with 3 backticks, a squiggly line, an R, then the code chunk name, and then any parameters you have, and then you end with 3 more backticks. So what I have done here is plot 3 visualizations using the same line, but with 3 different parameters. And one thing I always stress is name your code chunks. Unless you do not name all of your code chunks, if you just name one of the code chunks and don't name the other ones, R Markdown will not knit to an output. So either always name your code chunks or don't name any. I highly stress that you should always just name your code chunks and don't forget to name them separate in separate things. So here, the first visualization I've done is plot of pressure. And I used R everything because I'm not giving any parameters to limit what's the output. So here on the right side, you see the line for the code, plot of pressure is on there. Then the plot is assisted. Then following next is I want to only see the plot. So that's when I would put echo equals false. So this tells R Markdown, I want to hide my code, but I want to include my visualization or any output that I will get from my R code chunk. So that, and then the last thing is if I want to display nothing, I don't want to display any code or any output. And this is relevant, for example, if you want to do some analyses or you want to do some calculations beyond the back, but you don't want to showcase the code, and you don't want to showcase any visualization that comes in. And that's when you would use include equals false. And two more things to go over. One is, let's say you have a lot of messages that comes up. This could be in the form of if you're doing a lot of for loop, or if you do import a lot of libraries like I've done here. Some of you may be familiar when you have a lot of libraries imported, sometimes certain functions will override others. Certain functions will show you, oh, this is what I've imported. And if you don't want to showcase that, then you would use message equals false. So here I've demonstrated what happens when message equals false, but I will knit it again after and showcase what happens if you have message equals true. Or simply, if I remove this command, the default is also true. So I'm just going to write message equals true default. So if I knit this to HTML, oh, see, I forgot to rename this as something else. So message false. Sorry, message true. R Markdown did not like that I named it the same thing. So it should work now. Then the final thing while that's running is if you don't want to display warnings, you will write warning equals false. So sometimes if you are doing like a shiny or interactive dashboard and your grid went off the projected border, sometimes you'll come up with warning. And if you don't want that to keep displaying, you will put warning equals false. So here, I guess none of these, let me just try this real quick.
Can I ask a question real quick while you're
Yeah, for sure. What's up?
To get like an R Markdown section that's just text that isn't a subheading, is there any syntax you need to have that goes in front of it, or do you just start typing?
You just start typing. So kind of like what I did up here.
Okay.
To name a section of a Markdown, you don't need to have any sort of pre or after code or anything.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, it's message equals true, or the default, which will show up all that blurb, which some of you should be familiar with. Then another good thing R Markdown can do is you can embed R code. So let's say you're trying to calculate the slope or the intercept, but you are tired of keep writing, 0.00549. What R could do is you could just call it as a variable within a code chunk and call it within your text. And that's what I'm trying to show here. So one way you could do it is you could define your variables like what I've done here. So R inline R, and I've defined A as 2 + 2. Then I can use the format backtick R variable name backtick. So R A and with backtick at the beginning and the end, which if you see up here, it shows 4 at the end. You can also construct the calculation within the inline R code. So that's what I've done here to construct the calculation within the inline R code, and it also shows up as 4. And once again, because this is technically a text, you can still bold, italicize. So here I've bolded this result, and I get the bolded 4. Then the final thing is embedding an external image. And oftentimes you want to embed something cool, some good visualization from Python you've used, for example. Then what you do is the exclamation mark, then open, close parentheses, open, close brackets, square brackets, then the directory. So here I have embedded this image, as you can see. Then I've just listed underneath some good output formats and the definitive guide, which for me is a great help for trying to understand how to do a lot of the formatting. And what I have done up here is a custom formatting, but there are a lot more options that's available. And the definitive guide is a great tool to reference. So now jumping from that, I'm gonna actually code with live, which I know it's nobody tells you to ever do that, but it's the best tool I've always found that students tend to learn is when you show them how to do it live. So I'm just going to first copy and paste some of my predetermined metadata, and we can get started. All right, so for example, I have a project about using a marketing data set to try to predict the number of sales, and I'm using only one of the variables called YouTube. So first thing I will do is I would write the title, so predicting sales using marketing data set. And let's say I want to show a really cool visualization at the beginning. And this is just something I've got from the internet. And then I can start describing what I'm trying to do. So for example, the objective of this analysis is to create a linear regression model to predict sales using the YouTube variable. The equation is as follows. Y equals beta naught plus beta 1 times x. And oh, one more thing is if you want underscore, R Markdown is able to recognize when you do underscore, it's the subscript. Then I would say in the equation, the y represents the predicted sales value. I can just copy this part. It's not necessary. All right. So the y is the predicted value, the beta naught is the intercept, the beta 1 is the slope or the relationship between the y and the x is the YouTube values. So if let me just move that to the left here. Let me just knit this to HTML real quick. Once again, if anybody have any questions, stop me at any time and don't be afraid to ask. All right, so you can see my first bullet point is my first header or subheader in this case, and I have predicting sales using marketing data set. I've embedded this local file for picture, and I have all my information, and my citation is at the very bottom. All right, so obviously with any R classes, you're going to have to be needing some libraries. So here is a library, and I put message equals false because I don't want to see all of that. I've written over this and I've written over that. And then we can follow this up by some exploratory analyses. So here I've declared that this is what I'm importing the data from. So the data is marketing, and it's just the package that's available in R. Then maybe we can calculate some summary statistics. Let's bold that. No, I meant italicize. So R Markdown also recognizes if you surround it, it gives a special color. The data set has 3 independent variables and the dependent variable. And my variables are dash YouTube, and this is our variable. I believe there's also Facebook. Let me it that way. Newspaper, and we got sales, which is our target variable. So if I knit this to HTML, and R Markdown will update this window on the right with as long as you are using the same file. So you see this created list, summary statistics is italicized. Then following through, we probably want to create a summary table, right? That's typically the 5-number summary. So summary of marketing, 3 backticks. And I will call this table 1.1, summary statistics for the marketing data set. Let me just knit that real quick, just to show what the table looks like, because I think I haven't shown you guys that yet. So here, summary, marketing, YouTube, Facebook, newspaper, sales, and it's all nicely packed in its own block. So you can clearly tell that all 4 variables are numeric. So I'm just going to write that. But for numeric, I'm going to bold and italicize. Then we can do some preliminary visualizations. So for example, if you want to graph all of the variables in a histogram, and this is a neat trick I've learned when I was taking the visualization class. Is to use the gather function. All right, saves me the trouble of writing them all. And I will call this figure 1.2. This is the histogram for all of the numerical variables. Yeah, I'll just show that real quick. I'm also going to include a correlation plot as well. All right, so let's knit this. My computer is a little slow. It's typically a lot quicker for R Markdown. So here is a visualization. Typically, you might draw histograms for all of your numerical variables for your exploratory analysis. And like I suggested here, the histogram for the sales variable shows relatively normal distribution. Not the best, but this is just an example. Then this is a correlation plot. For all the numerical variables, correlation plot indicates a strong positive relationship between YouTube and sales. So the next part we typically do is some explanatory analyses. So explanatory analysis. So let's say I want to look at a scatter plot between YouTube and sales. So I'm using ggplot. Question, anybody? All right, and here is our scatter plot. So once again, all of this visualization is embedded right into your R file within your document. So it's a lot easier than trying to screenshot it all the time. Once again, I'm just going to call this figure 1.4, and I'm going to write, judging from the scatter plot, it can be interpreted there is a linear relationship between YouTube and sales. Obviously, it's not the best, but it'll have to do. So let's say, judging from that, we could do a linear relationship. There is a linear relationship. We could do a regression. So doing regression. And here, I'm just going to copy this over using the LM function. And here, what I've done is I have called m_intercept and m_slope as the actual intercept and the slope from the model. And that way I can actually call it within my text. So that's what I'm going to write here. So using, actually, let's knit this real quick. All right, so we get an intercept of 8.439 and then YouTube of 0.0475. So not the biggest increase, but that's all right. So we can write using linear regression, the equation to predict sales based on YouTube is y equals, and just the same equation that I've used before, where the intercept is, and here I'm gonna actually just call m underscore intercept backtick, and the slope equals backtick r m underscore slope. So if I knit this, and while it's doing that, I can give it the whole equation, sales equals 8.439 plus 0.048 times 0.048 times YouTube. See, underneath here, where the intercept is 8.439 and the slope is 0.0475. So R is able to keep those variables because I declared them in my code chunk up here. So let's say now that we have this, we want to plot it. We can do that too. I'm using ggplot and using method equals lm because it gives the same result anyway. It's just a least of sum squared, right? Least of sum, yeah, errors. All right. And this is our line. And let's say we want to do some test on model assessment, see how good is our model. So goodness of fit. Let's take a look.
What are the brackets like on line 126 where it's like the three carrots? Like what are the brackets for where it says R model assessment?
Here,
Yeah.
the squiggly brackets.
Yeah, like what does the R model assessment do? Like is it just there for
Right, so the R here indicates an R code chunk, and then the model assessment is just the name of the code chunk. I've
Okay.
called this code chunk regression line. I call this code chunk model assessment. So if you don't name all your code chunks, then it will just show unnamed code chunk. But if you name one code chunk but don't name other, R is not going to like that. So because I'm trying to showcase that it's better to always have our code chunk named, I've named mine just straight out of being easy to identify what part of the code that's coming from.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. All right, so looks like our R squared, adjusted R squared is 0.99. Our R squared is 0.6119. So I can write the goodness of fit, indicate that the YouTube is useful for predicting sales with R squared equals that. And we can write inclusion. And I'm just writing a whole block using regression. The final equation was blah, the goodness of fit. However, it'd be wise to include multiple variables for future analyses. And let's say you're done. Now I can do a final knit to HTML. All right, so my conclusion, my statements are up here. And once again, the citations is always at the bottom. And if you scroll to the top, oh, I guess I didn't do consistent amount of number signs. But yeah, so the table of contents, you can structure it however you would like. So if I click on linear regression, it will drop down to linear regression. And it applies same for if you're in Word, if you're in PDF, and obviously the HTML like I'm showing here. Anybody have any questions? That is the it of my presentation.
Yeah, I had a quick question about, is there a way you can do the subscripts and the superscripts not in the formula section, but in the regular markdown sections?
So in the write-up section, like in a regular text, no, unfortunately, this is the only way to make it subscript. Because if you, you need the dollar signs. I don't know if there's a way for R Markdown to automatically recognize.
Okay,
you can always define your own function to detect it, but then you would need like the backtick R, then your function, right?
Yeah, no, I'm fine with just a little caret and some parentheses. I think I can live with that for now.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
So how do you do not equal to sign?
Oh, not equal. I'm literally just Googling here. Not equal sign R Markdown. I'm not sure. R Markdown. I believe there's a, like the Unicode could get you that, but I think there may be a quick let me try actually. It's telling me it's backslash. Nope, that's not it. I'm sure it is out there. It's just I cannot find it right now. What if I put? Nope. Well, I guess you can always notation it like exclamation mark equal. Sorry, I don't know the answer to that question right now.
Yeah, fine. I'll look it, and if I get that, post it in Slack.
So the quick guide has a reference to a definitive book, the definitive guide. That may have it. Google is not showing up for me right now. Sorry about that.
Thank you, then.
Anybody else have any other questions? So one last thing, I guess, before I finish is, so there is also our presentation that kind of gives it a similar idea, but it comes out as like a PowerPoint or Google slide. And it's great for if you're creating a dashboard within your Google slide or your PowerPoint or any sort of visualization that requires interactiveness to it. And that's where our Markdown shines the most. But other than that,
I had a quick question about the table of contents up there. What do you have to do to create that? Is that just coming from your section names?
Yeah, so when I put the number sign before, I guess it would be in here. So when I put conclusion, I put 2 number sign in front of it. So that's why it was even more indented in this. But if I, for example, put 3 in there and put 3 in model assessment and I knit it, it should be indented even further, which would mean the sub sections. Where did I? Or here. I think it's because I'm being inconsistent. Here, let's do it this way. If I remove them, it should show up.
But it sounds like anytime you use one or more hashtags, it'll auto-fill into the table of contents at the top.
That's right.
Okay.
And
cool.
you can customize to not show up as
Got
well.
it.
Yeah, so see if I only use one number sign, it indents back to be like a header.
Great, thank you.
All right. Anybody else?
Will you show your title block? Because I think that's where that formatting is.
I
tend to get rid of mine.
So this doesn't, my title block up here doesn't format this section. Mine just formats the caption for and what kind of theme I'm looking at, and like it's more in line with how I'm formatting to display the images and displaying the graphs. But yes, in here is what you would include if you want specific header including things to format.
Yeah, I think it's in your output HTML document, which is why your total depth is 2. You know, that whole piece there.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I understand what you're saying now. Yes. Yeah.
And I have a question about naming your header blocks or naming your block or chunks. Is that something that the documentation says to do? Like, I just didn't see you using it. Or what's the benefit to doing that as opposed to just not having anything?
So, for example, if you want to not name any of your code chunks, that's perfectly fine. So like we can create an example real quick. Just call it test. Here we go. If I just delete all of this, then I can still knit it. Oh, it's going to ask me to save. That's fine. But underneath here, when it's running, it's going to say label unnamed chunk 1, unnamed chunk 2, unnamed chunk 3.
Okay.
And that's perfectly fine. But let's say you named one of them named, and you try to knit it. R is not right. So that's perfectly fine too. You have named and unnamed, but let's say you named this one as named as well. Then it tells me execution halted is because you named it the same thing.
So like the benefit is just seeing where your code might be running longer, like on a specific chunk or something like that when you're looking at that output. Okay, cool.
Yep. Yeah. There are other ways. You can also define functions where it calls a specific chunk to be run. That is also possible, and that's where naming it comes useful.
Yeah, that'd be super beneficial. But cool, great.
Yeah. They really recommend you to name them because it's much easier for you to decode where you're making a mistake. All right. Anybody else have any questions? All right. I guess that's the end of my presentation. So thank you everybody for listening. All right, I am going to stop sharing.
Thanks for taking your time out of your day to do this.
No worries.
Thank you so much, Ben, for presenting all this information to us. I know it's been super helpful, so I hope you all learned a lot from the R Markdown tutorial. And also for the spreadsheet that we just sent out, could you guys all put your emails down so that we can send you guys the R Markdown file just in case you didn't get it? And then also, I just want to mention that we have board positions opening up for the DSG group in a couple of weeks. So like treasurer, event manager, and then social media. So be on the lookout for those. And we have a few more events coming up in the next couple of weeks. So another Python errors and Tableau dashboards workshop, and then another one will be on like a LinkedIn workshop. So feel free to join those events as well. And thank you everyone for joining as well. So yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Stay tuned.
Oh, and then someone's asking, what do we find about these events? We're gonna be sending them out on the Slack channel, but if you want to register now to the skills workshop, Python and like Tableau one, I'll just send it here. And then for the LinkedIn workshop, but we're gonna be sending this in the like all of our social media. So just make sure to follow us either on LinkedIn or Slack or Facebook, because that's where we actually promote everything.
We're also working on the website, so hopefully we can see the website soon. And also all the current students will receive the emails from data center. That is also a great way to know our activities and events. So please pay attention, like don't just ignore those emails. I know a lot of people do, but that's a way that you can, we are pretty sure that you can receive our message.
Yeah, and definitely just stay up to date with like our Slack as well. Because yeah, we'll also be having like a international students event too, where we'll like help out with like knowing like the job timelines and everything. So just like be, I guess, active on the Slack channel. And if you guys ever have any more questions, just like feel free to reach out to any of us for any help that you guys might need. So yeah, that should be it.
Said there was a Facebook channel or sorry, a Facebook page or group. Can you
we do.
Yeah, let me get the link.
Yeah, thank you.
And then we also have a LinkedIn page. I don't know if you follow it, but there's one for that as well.
And then if for the future, for like especially fall quarter, which is when we're going to be planning other events as well, if you have any ideas or things that you guys need or want, just let us know. You can email any of us or Slack it as well, and we can try and do something so that we can bring it to you guys.
Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, you too.
Yeah, bye everyone. Have a great weekend.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you guys.
Well, bye-bye.